All right, welcome everyone to today's session on divine influencers. We're so happy to have all of you and to have our two guests, Reverend Caleb, Reverend Joanna. I'm going to share just a brief presentation to introduce the topic and introduce our speakers for you. Hopefully everything goes well and you can hear the videos. If you can't, please let me know. So today, our presentation is on divine influencers, progressive faith in the digital age. Look at these faces. Some of these are the most influential progressive faith leaders in America right now, and you've probably never seen them on Sunday morning TV or in mega church pulpits. That's because they're building something entirely new, which is a digital ministries reaching millions through short videos, authentic conversations, and radical welcome. So today you'll meet two stars of this movement, ministers who are changing hearts and minds one post at a time, who've mastered the art of doing deep theology in 60 seconds, and who I think represent the future of progressive religion. And I think after today, you're going to want to follow both of them. First, I want to introduce the Reverend Dr. Caleb Lyons. Reverend Dr. Caleb Lyons is an ordained minister with standing in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the United Church of Christ, and the Progressive Christian Alliance. He serves as senior minister of University Christian Church in San Diego, co-executive director of the Center of Progressive Christianity, and co-host of the Moonshine Jesus Show, which is a podcast that explores the theology and politics of sci-fi and fantasy pop culture, complete with themed cocktails, which I love. He's known for his creative preaching and innovative worship series, such as The Theology of Broadway. Caleb is also a social media influencer and award-winning author. He has a devotional called Awakened, a 52-week progressive Christian devotional, which was named the best devotional of 2025 by the Illumination Book Awards and was a Next Generation Indie Book Award finalist. His earlier book, The Great Digital Commission, Embracing Social Media for Church Growth and Transformation, earned an Illumination Book Award Silver Medal. To introduce you to Reverend Dr. Caleb Lyons, I want to show you one of his videos. I love his series called MAGA versus Jesus. I think he's on round 15. We're going to watch round 14 today as an introduction.
Okay, MAGA versus Jesus, round 14. MAGA says, let's demo part of the White House and build a ballroom. But Jesus says, you're like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but full of decay within. Now look, I wouldn't exactly call the plans for the new White House ballroom beautiful, but the full of decay within part, that certainly tracks. MAGA says, tariffs will save America. But the Bible says, whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker. The excessive tariffs that the Trump administration has put into place are disproportionately affecting people who are already living in poverty. MAGA says, we need a strong leader. But Jesus says, the rulers of Gentiles lord it over them. Whoever wants to be great must be a servant. I think the leaders in our country have forgotten that they have been elected to serve the people, not the other way around. MAGA says, God bless our wealth. But Jesus says, life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Jesus knew that living simply to accumulate stuff missed the entire point of life, to love God and to love neighbor. You see, the teachings and actions of MAGA are simply incompatible with the teachings of Jesus Christ.
All right, so that was MAGA versus Jesus. I'd like to introduce our second speaker today, Reverend Joanna Fontaine Crawford, who has been the lead minister of Live Oak UU Church since August 2014, after serving at the multi-site First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston. As part of the requirements for becoming an ordained UU minister, she earned a Master of Divinity degree from the Ecumenical Seminary Houston Graduate School of Theology, did a dual internship with Northwoods UU Church in the Woodlands and the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which we know it's an international online UU church, and completed hospital chaplaincy training at the Methodist Hospital of Houston. After being pestered by her teenage children to explore TikTok, she fell in love with it as an educational platform. In 2022, she began sharing information about Unitarian Universalism on it as Rev Joe UU, and currently has 73,000 followers. I don't know if this is certain, but I will say probably certainly she has more followers than anybody who has a platform dedicated to Unitarian Universalism. So let's see a video from Reverend Joanna, one of her more popular TikTok videos.
Reasons why you would probably not be happy in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Let's go. First of all, if you believe that there is only one path, one way of understanding what is most holy and true, you're probably not going to be happy in a UU church, because we are deliberately pluralist. We pull wisdom from all the different world's faiths, and every individual UU gets to figure out what is most true for them. If you believe that people are born evil or with a propensity to evil, and it requires the intervening force of some type of a deity to get us to act decent, yeah, you're not going to be happy in a UU church. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people. If you believe that God has created a natural order and that families should fit this traditional model with certain gender roles, you're probably not going to be happy in one of our congregations. If it is important for you to hear about Jesus every Sunday, there are some exceptions. We do have what are called some affiliated churches that are more explicitly progressive Christian, but the vast majority of UU congregations do not identify as Christian in any way, although there may be individual Christian members in it. But so you're probably not going to hear about that every Sunday. And also, if it's really important to you to hear about God every Sunday, again, in most UU churches, that may not happen. Now, I would also say if it's really important to you that you never hear the word God, you might be able to find some congregations, but overall, no, we are a big tent religion. If you believe that spirituality has no connection with the world of politics, you probably won't be happy in a UU church, because this is a way of us living out our religious values. UU churches are often full of activists, and they are involved in what many see as progressive causes: the environment, reproductive justice, LGBTQIA+ issues, voting rights. It goes on and on. So there's some reasons why you might not feel comfortable in a UU church. So what if none of those apply to you and you kind of find all of this intriguing? Well, feel free to, you can look at some of my videos. I have some playlists like a UU 101, or ask away, ask me some questions.
Okay, to conclude, just wanted to say that this forum is sponsored by the Starr King School for the Ministry Student Body Government. We're going to spend most of the time in Q&A, so submit your questions through the Q&A feature on this webinar. Since we're sponsored by Starr King, questions from Starr King students will generally receive priority, so please identify yourself as a Starr King student so we can prioritize those questions. And finally, I just want to thank Matty Waterman for all of his technical assistance and for being with us here today as well. So that was it for the presentation, and now we're going to hear directly from both of our speakers. We're going to start with Reverend Joanna. Thank you so much for joining us, and want to invite you to share a few words.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here, and I'm so thrilled that you're having this conversation. I think that in our little church worlds, especially in seminary, nowadays we often will talk about a third place, right? The idea, it's not work, it's not home. And I hear a lot of people that are talking about, oh, well, how do we make our church a third place? Like, do we put in a coffee shop? And to me, I'm like, okay, the third place is already happening and it's online. How is your church or your denomination or your religion showing up there? So I'm thrilled that y'all are talking about this.
Thank you so much. And now we'll hear from Reverend Caleb.
Hey, well, thank you all so much for allowing me to be with you all today. I'm honored and feel privileged to be here. So, you've heard some of the things that I do. I spend my days preaching, teaching, creating content, and occasionally, when the spirit insists, irritating MAGA Christian nationalists on the internet. And so, I just want to start with a simple conviction that digital ministry isn't marketing, it's mission. For years, churches and faith communities have treated social media like it is kind of a digital bulletin board for announcements, for potlucks, reminding people to bring canned goods and the like. Meanwhile, the most visible Christian presence online, faith presence online, has belonged to people who use the gospel, the Bible, like a sledgehammer. If someone's first experience of faith on TikTok is one of these things, and there's a good chance they're going to hear about a God who hates the same people that they do. And I think that this matters because digital spaces today are public square. Digital spaces are the places where people get their news. They're the places where people have their existential crises and deconstruct their faith at 2 a.m. online. And for a long time, progressive Christians, progressive faith leaders in general, were almost completely absent from these spaces in any meaningful way. So I made a theological decision. I think that if we believe in a God of liberation or affirmation or justice, then those values deserve an algorithmic witness. So, just briefly, my approach has three different pieces. The first is accessible theology. I think that taking biblical scholarship, Greek verbs, historical context, ethical implications, and translating them into 90-second sermons on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, is significant. It's something that needs to be done because if we're not there, then the other folks continue to have the loudest voice. So in this MAGA versus Jesus series, where I hold up these biblical teachings and compare them with our modern Pharisees, the nationalists, that I think that series helps to show in just a few seconds how hypocrisy is being used in a very visible way. I think the impact is stunning because a single video can reach more people in 24 hours than a decade of Sunday mornings. I get messages from people who say, "Oh, I finally understand that verse," or "I left church years ago and I'm reconsidering now." There are teens in rural areas and adults in countries with state-sanctioned homophobia who can't walk into an affirming church, but they can scroll into one. So it's significant. My ordaining denomination is the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And there are now 277,000 members of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. It is the fastest declining denomination in the country, which means that in like a couple of seconds on my phone, I can reach more people than the entire denomination. It is a powerful tool. So I think a second part is creating a pastoral presence where people are able to come as their full selves. Each week I hear from LGBTQ plus folks who say that I didn't even know a Christian or a faith person could be open and affirming. And so creating a space where people feel like they are seen as a child of God with inherent worth and dignity, I think is valuable. Third, I think is advocacy and education. I like to write Substack articles, publish scholarship, and try to bring factual theology into public debate. I don't think that Christians should retreat from politics. I don't think that any faith leaders should retreat from politics. I think we should engage with them prophetically. When scripture is used to justify cruelty, silence, it's not pastoral, it's permissive. So digital ministry gives us the chance to speak a faith that looks like Jesus or more authentic religion and not empire. And so I think that if we're asking, does digital ministry work? I think, yeah. it works, and not just in a theoretical sense, in a real practical sense, because you can have videos reach millions of views and be shared widely. So I'm excited to talk to you more about all this today, but I think this is an incredible opportunity, and thanks to you at Star King School of Ministry for thinking about how it is that this next phase of ministry is something that we can encourage people to have a real active voice in the public square.
Thank you so much. And we're starting to get the questions coming in. Please continue to type in those questions. But I'd like to pose the first question to both of you. We have an entrepreneurial ministry class, and I think a lot of people are interested in taking their ministry online, but there's an intimidation factor there. How did you get over that hump? And what would you say to students that are interested in doing what you are doing? Maybe Reverend Joanna, you can start.
Sure. So one of the first pieces of advice I get whenever another clergy person talks to me about getting on is I say, get on the platform. And I'm specifically on TikTok. I sometimes will repost it other places, but that's my medium. And I say, get on it and simply consume it for at least 2 weeks. If you haven't fallen in love with it by the end of that, then go to another platform, because it's going to come out in what you do. So I think that's the first thing, is find a platform that you love for what it can do. And then I think that it really is a matter of diving in. And the good thing is, at least on TikTok, you're not going to get many views at first. That's, unless you just a miracle happens. And so like my first ones, I was on sabbatical and I was making some TikToks about like hiking and things like that. And so it was just giving me kind of a taste of it. And I do think that there's something about, I think as you start doing this, you're going to want to get very clear about who your audience is, what your purpose is, and your guiding principles around it. But I don't think that you can really do a whole lot of that, especially the guiding principles, ahead of time. I think you have to dive in and experience it, and then sort of the questions are going to come to you.
Thank you. Reverend Caleb.
Yeah, thanks, Reverend Joanna. I think that's great advice. I think the kind of content that you're producing makes a big difference too, like based on your comfort level. And so obviously different types of content play better in different spaces. And so I think just being willing to get on and try is a pretty good first step, and to be authentic. Study after study shows that the reason that people leave organized religion isn't because they stop being interested in spirituality. It's because people find organized religion to be a poor mediator of real, authentic spiritual exploration. And so I think one of the things that really comes through on social media is whether or not you're actually being authentic. And so I would say, be authentic to who you are, talk about what's important to you, and try to find like your unique voice. And I think that there's no one right formula that equals success. It's just, what feels the most natural and authentic to you. And so, for instance, I've discovered that for me, like the intersection of politics and religion, that's my sweet spot. And my video sweet spot is 90 seconds, right? And so it's figuring out exactly what works for you and not being afraid to try to do things, to try to do different things. And if stuff doesn't work, to not get discouraged, but to keep trying and do it in a way that's authentic to who you are and what your values are.
Yeah. And let me add to that. That is so good. At least on TikTok, authenticity is so much more important than polish. And so if what is holding you back is feeling that you are, technically not able to do this, I will tell you, the videos I have done where like I've had B-roll and they've been super polished, they go nowhere. But get me passionate about something, sitting on my couch, my hair not done, in a bathrobe, that invariably will be the one that goes viral.
That is great advice. Thank you. Steph, do you have a question or would you like to pull a question from the Q&A?
Yeah, I do. I have both, but let's go with the Q&A question first. Amy asked, how do you deal with other clergy who might be behind the times in terms of using digital ministry to forward the message of the religious left? I find that there is often a bias about anything like TikTok, and I have personally found new community and new learnings that I wouldn't have previously had access to through this media. There are some generational biases on the topic as well, and I'm an older person. Rev Joanna, would you like
Oh,
to start?
sure.
Yeah.
So my answer is actually pretty simple, which is I don't. I don't. I mean, I don't. Not that I shun them or anything, but it's not my job to try to convince them. And if there are people who are interested in what I'm doing, like I will go out of my way to work with them. I absolutely want to encourage getting more progressive voices out there. But yeah, some people are, some people just are not interested in it. Like some people, let's be honest, some people absolutely look down their nose at it. Go ahead, doesn't bother me.
That's
Wonderful,
what,
Rev Caleb.
yeah, I mean, I think ignore the haters, first of all. If there are people who tell you not to do something because it's not a valid form of ministry or whatever, uh, don't pay any attention to that. People are going to tell you that about your ministry your whole life, no matter what you're doing. And especially, I think sometimes clergy can be particularly guilty of this. That we like to think that churches are places where everyone's really altruistic and really wants everybody to succeed. And unfortunately, it's not like that all the time. And people like get jealous and they compare themselves to each other. And this happens in ways with like national clergy, or it happens in smaller ways at like the local level of which church is doing the best. And it's all ridiculous because really what we want is a message that empowers people and tells people that when they've been excluded from other religious communities, that they are loved and that they can make a difference, right? That's what it's all about. But all of this like plays into it. And so sometimes I think you get clergy haters. So I would say don't pay attention to that. But yeah, if there are people who are interested in learning, then I think absolutely, sharing what you found to be successful is a good practice. If people ask to be generous with time and space, and it can be hard too, depending on what a faith community's situation is to know how to really use the technology, or it can be intimidating to figure out the algorithms. And so if you get a really a keen insight on that, I think it's great to share and it's helpful. But I agree with you, Reverend Joanna. Like I also am not one who tries to bring my colleagues along, but try to make myself accessible if folks have questions.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question that's specific to each of you. We'll start with you, Reverend Caleb. I'm amazed by the breadth of your social media presence. You are on TikTok. You have a new Substack that's doing really well. You're on Facebook, and you do so many different types of videos. And on top of that, you're a parish minister. And a lot of our students are going into parish ministry. So the question is, how do you do it all?
The key is to find content that you can double, triple, and quadruple dip in. Right. And so I think this is just the key to success in ministry, because this is one of the few professions left where we really are generalists trying to do all the things. One thing that I have going for me is in my role at Center for Progressive Christianity, a large part of what I do is create digital content. So in that case, it is my job to create digital content. But I always try, whenever I am doing something, to think about how I can make that effort have the maximum impact. So like if I'm preaching, I think about, okay, this segment of my sermon, how could I say this in such a way that it's going to impact people on Sunday morning and that I can make that about 90 seconds so that I can then use that across social media. And then I think, okay, well, if there's that quote might have worked, but it's not long enough for videos. Could I pull that quote and make that a pull quote that I could share, not on TikTok, but could I use that on Instagram and Facebook and Threads? And so I think it's always kind of trying to think about that, about how everything that you're doing can tie together and that you can kind of reuse or adapt content to make it relevant in different spaces.
Those great tips. Reverend Joanna, most of our students here are Unitarian Universalists because this is a Unitarian Universalist seminary, as you know. And I think people have tried to get Unitarian Universalism out there on various social media platforms through various means without much success, but you've broken through. You've been one of the few that have done that. I think part of it is because you're willing to respond to the haters, and I think I find that personally very entertaining and educational at the same time. But could you talk about why you think you've been one of the most successful Unitarian Universalists on social media?
I'm not afraid of repetition. and and really that that was one of the first kind of learnings for me getting onto TikTok, was realizing, oh, unlike Facebook or blogs or things where if you keep getting the same questions, you can just send someone to your FAQ. You can do playlists, but they're really not used that well. And so I just kind of embraced that. And I think that I have probably made at least 100 videos just answering what is Unitarian Universalism. So that was a big part of it. And then for me, it was, I wanted it to be a conversation. And so the vast majority of the videos that I do, TikTok makes it really easy where someone can leave a comment and you can reply with a video. I did have to figure out what my guiding principles were going to be in terms of how I responded. And honestly, I just kind of lucked into this. And that was, I made a guiding principle about sort of that I didn't want to humiliate the other person. Because a lot of times in comments, my judgment is wrong. I think that someone is leaving like something snarky and they really didn't mean it that way. And so I decided, I'm going to, assume good intentions, sometimes to comedic effect. And so absolutely, there are some videos where it is someone who does not have good intentions. And I just come in and I'm very wide-eyed and innocent and I'm answering it as if they are. But I will tell you, there have been some times where I thought that's what I was doing, and then the person responded and said, "Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate." Oh boy, glad I didn't, reach out and attack them for that. Yeah.
Very good advice. I think in life too.
Yeah.
Steph, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm so curious because in most of the ministries, I assume you do like in person, you have like your congregants that you know that you're speaking to, or like, there's like a face-to-face interaction, but you don't have that necessarily in the same way through social media. So I'm curious to what information do you have about your followers? And this might be more in line with like Rev Caleb. I know you have like a podcast and that might give more specific demographic information than TikTok. But I guess for both of you, like, how do you know your followers? And like, what does that look like? Who are you speaking to?
I think you're right. I think the demographics you can get across the analytics across social media is great because there are, of course, people who are on multiple platforms who see your content in multiple places, but there are also different people. And at least for me, my demographics break down differently depending on the platform. And so there are different people. But for me, like the place where community really builds, because comment sections, yeah, they can be something else. And so You get good and bad there, but the place where relationships have really built for me has been in direct messaging. And so I think that that becomes really important in following up with that. And so I get, hundreds of those a day, and so you can't keep up with all of them, but some of them you can, and some of them are easy to tell. I get wolf in sheep's clothing, you're going straight to hell. I get all of those every day, and so those, you can just go through and get rid of. But then there are people who are really seeking genuine things, and so you can't tell like exactly who all is watching, but you can tell some about who all is watching. And you can build relationships with people with a bit of intentionality. And so I found that to be really meaningful, that like people who I would never have interacted with might see me as their pastor. And that's like an honor and it's encouraging, it's inspiring when someone's like, hey, I wasn't interested in religion because I thought it was all misogyny and transphobia and homophobia and xenophobia and all that stuff. They're like, you've shown me that that's not what religion is. That's not authentic religion at all. And I'm actually really deeply interested in that. For me, that's something that's encouraging. So for me, it's the direct messaging along with the demographic information I can find.
So for me, part of this was actually choosing my audience, getting clear in my head of who I wanted them to be, and then having my videos be directed towards them. So like mine are actually not directed at unity. If you're already a Unitarian Universalist, you're welcome to listen, but you're not my audience. My audience is the people who have, perhaps they're going through deconstruction, people who have progressive values, but it's the people who have never heard of Unitarian Universalism. Because I'm a raised UU, I live in Texas, I've been meeting these folks my entire life. So part of it was that, right? So I'm choosing my audience by how I create the videos. The other part, this was a hard decision to make. I do not consider what I am doing to be ministry. It is a ministry. It certainly is evangelism. It is sharing information. But once I made that decision, and that was a hard decision to make, right? Because I would get people like in my DMs and all who wanted me to be their minister. And I had to look at what I was capable of, because I'm a solo minister here. I have a family. And so that was a decision that I made. So I very rarely will go into that level of relationship. That being said, I have folks that have been watching these for years. I'm grateful for them. And we do wind up communicating, via comments or videos back and forth.
Wonderful. I am one of the people who have been following you for years. Thank you both so much. Yola?
Yeah, I'm going to combine two of the questions in our Q&A. Um, Claire asks if you can recommend ways to get started on the technical basis of these platforms. And then somebody else asks about the different social media platforms and what material is most effective for each. So maybe if you take yourself back to when you first got started, how did you figure out just the technical aspects of editing a video and what social media platforms to try out first?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can get started with a phone. I think that they've made it so easy, in terms of actually being able to post it. And I think Reverend Joanna, your insight too about not needing to be super polished is so important. I also have found that to be true. That like that if I guess maybe it feels less authentic to folks, but I found that to be true like generally across social media that like that it doesn't need to be real super polished. One of the things that I found pretty quickly that I did need though was a good microphone. And so especially if I'm filming in the sanctuary, and I do that a lot because I think also like if somebody is saying something that you don't expect like a pastor to say. Looking like a pastor helps to make that message more effective. So like I never actually on Sunday mornings wear robes and stoles like ever. I don't like them. They're hot and so hard to move and stuff. And so, but I often do on social media just because like visually it makes that appearance. So I think then just going and trying to do the videos, playing around with different editing if you're using in-app editing, or if you're using something else like for TikTok has CapCut. I'll use that sometimes. Instagram has an edits app. We use that sometimes, but most of the time I just use the native TikTok editor, and that's what works best for me. There's also this thing called Opus Clip that I've used some, where you can paste a link to to say a sermon, and it will AI will clip the little segments for you in 90-second bits or whatever, and automatically put the captions in and stuff, because that can be quite a bit of work, to go through and edit, then to go through and generate the captions and edit the captions and all. So that can be a good tool to use as well to help with the technical side. And I think you're also right that it kind of depends. My default typically is I edit and post in TikTok, and then I take those videos and place those in. For me, I use Instagram to automatically cross post to Threads and to Facebook, and so that saves a step. But just a little technical piece. If you're doing that and you're adding collaborators on Instagram, also another great tool to get your content to a wider audience quicker, to find people that you can collaborate with who already have larger audiences. But you have to add the collaborations after you cross post. So and then to YouTube Shorts. So those are just a couple of quick technical insights that I've found helpful along the way.
So this is where I really changed. So before I got on TikTok, I had worked for Church of the Larger Fellowship, which is all online. And then, of course, with the pandemic, I'd been creating my own sermon videos, and like I was using Final Cut Pro and again, B-roll and old movie clips and things like that. And I don't use any of that fancy stuff anymore because it takes more time, and it really, like, there is no bang for the buck. I do have CapCut. I've used it occasionally, but at this point, pretty much exclusively, I use the TikTok program that comes with the app. It's great. It generates captions for you. It now has a thing where you can go in, and if you've said or things like that, you can cut it out, and it's pretty good about that. So like the simplest really is the most effective for me. I also like what Reverend Caleb talked about with thinking about kind of how you're positioning yourself. Definitely, you need to have good sound. You need to have some decent lighting. There is power because people have a perception of what religious means. And so using some of those things can be really helpful. The first couple of years I was doing TikTok, so often I was in a clerical collar. A whole lot of that is because the Texas Ledge was in session, and so I frequently had to be in a collar and running down to the Capitol. But what I found is that captured people's attention, and especially for being someone who is female presenting in a collar and then talking about progressive things. So, definitely think about those things. Now, this is just because this is my desk, but they're kind of messy, but I have my stoles behind me. And so that too is something you may want to think about.
Another thing that just as you were talking, Reverend Joanna, that made me think of is like getting if you're serving a congregation, if you go into congregational ministry, like helping your congregation to understand how important it is too. I think it is really significant. And then like creating space in your building that allows you to do different things. And so like this room that I'm in right now is the room where bells are that controls like our bell system that I have remodeled into a podcast room that I've got like my professional microphone and lighting and all that camera and all that stuff. And so like the congregation, it was just unused space in the building that I was able to make. And so we're getting ready to kind of remodel and create a media studio in the sanctuary or in the building as well. And so I just think like getting congregation to buy into all of that and utilizing different spaces for different needs can be valuable as well.
Great, thank you. Steph, would you like to ask Shannon's question?
Yeah, Shannon was asking, how do you monetize and do you get paid for your work online?
So, very little. I did do people there. I occasionally would say, I'd use a certain turn of a phrase, and then people in the comments would say, "Oh, you need to put that on a t-shirt." And so I did that, and like all the proceeds go to our church. But over 4 years, I think I've made like $100. For monetizing, I am in the Creator Fund, and occasionally there will be a video that earns me a little bit of money, but most of the time it's like $3 a month. So, but I will say there are things that like with TikTok, I think it's like once you get 10,000 followers, then you can get in the Creator Fund. And I will admit, you have to have, so for a video to even qualify, it has to be at least a minute long. And so sometimes I'll be doing a video and I don't even think that it's going to go viral or anything, but I'll notice that it's at 50 seconds and I've had the experience. Now, you also like there's a trade-off because if a video is shorter, the chance is greater that you are going to get a lot of views. So you have to kind of weigh that. I've had some videos that were just under a minute and then they've gotten a lot of views and I've thought, oh, I could have gotten a few cents out of that. So I am absolutely not at the level where this is something that would pay my bills. The people who do that, like it's just a whole other level of doing that. And in religion, unless you're like Dan McClellan, I have another job along with it.
So I do monetize and I've had quite a bit of luck with that. So especially on TikTok, the creator rewards program that Reverend Joanna was just talking about. I've been in that for several years. That is one of the reasons why I do 90-second videos because as she said, once you hit that 60-second mark, it's eligible for monetization. And so I do get paid through TikTok. I also am a part of a progressive Christian influencer group that that pays us to create content, and Meta, so both on Instagram and Facebook, you also can get money there too. And so I have had a pretty good couple of months there. So it's I would say the challenge is that it's all kind of got to be icing because it's very tough to count on that income because you can't ever really predict what content is going to do well and what content isn't going to do well. And often, especially when you're getting started, it's never what you think. So you'll create something you're like, this is going to be great, and you'll get 2 likes and a comment or something, and then you'll be like, I just need to do. In fact, my first video that went really viral, like several million views, I was just like, oh, I need a content piece for today. I'll just take this piece of an old sermon, and it just took off, and you just never know. I would say the other piece is that um, TikTok in particular does a lot of shadow banning. And so, like you won't get officially blocked, but all of a sudden people will stop seeing your content. And so there are all kinds of ways that you can strategize to get out of that, but that does happen. And I've also had, you can only, like, you can't violate their originality policy. And so there are all kinds of rules about this, but like, I don't. And sometimes my videos still get flagged for an originality content violation, and you can appeal that, but you don't really have any say over whether they accept your appeal or not. And so I've gotten, like, for no real reason, randomly kicked out of the creator rewards program and had to reapply and get back in. And so it's kind of unpredictable, but it can be a helpful source of income, especially for those of us who are in ministry, and jobs don't always pay great. And if you live in the expensive part of the country, it can be helpful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Hila?
Yeah. We see digital creators do collaborations or collabs, as they're sometimes called. And somebody asks if you have any examples of a collaborative digital ministry. I don't know if you've seen it. I know you, Reverend Caleb, you have a podcast with a fellow progressive minister. But have either of you done anything with other ministers or collaborated with other creators?
Yeah, so I do it sometimes. We'll collaborate typically on just a piece of content or a project or something. For instance, last year in the run-up to the election through the Center for Progressive Christianity, we were running a campaign called Take Back Christianity. And so we went through a number of outreach efforts, and we did some collaborations with different creators. We also were involved with different organizations doing that. So there was one like Do You Vote that was trying to get out the vote and stuff. So we did some collabs with them. I would say the platform that makes collaborations the easiest is Instagram by far. Uh, uh, Facebook has kind of started to integrate some of that. YouTube has a collaboration feature. It's harder to use. Instagram is super easy. You just go through, and just like you were inviting someone, that you're tagging someone, you can do an invite to collaborate, and then that piece, of course, then shows up on everybody's feed on each person who's in the collaboration. So yeah, I've got, like, say on our podcast, just mostly goes to Facebook. We live stream to Facebook. And so we do that every week. But I think collaborations, I look at it a little bit differently. And I think Instagram is a really powerful tool. And so as you're getting started, I think that that's great, especially if you've got like some kind of an existing account that you can naturally do. Like, say you've got a congregational social media account that has 1,000 followers or something, and you've got 0 followers. Well, if you're producing religious content, you can add them as a collaborator automatically, and then you can accept it yourself, and you've automatically given yourself a little bit larger audience. So you can do that across, accounts that you manage as well. It doesn't have to be another individual you're collaborating with.
So I've done some campaigns that were collaborative, and one of the big ones is another UU minister, Sean Neil Barron in Colorado, collected some of the UU ministers who were doing social media, and this was one of many times when trans folks were really being attacked. And so, like, I can't remember what our hashtag was, perhaps trans people are divine, something like that. And so we were all putting those out and then referencing each other. And so the Standing on the Side of Love, or excuse me, the Side with Love organization has, they were supporting that and pushing some of that content out on their different ways to communicate to people too.
Thank you. I think Steph has a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, you both have talked a little bit about this, Rev Joanna, in your most recent answer, and Caleb, you were talking about this earlier, but I was wondering how you're using your social media presence to advance political or organizational goals that you think like progressive religion overall has, like equitable like pay, safe spaces for like transgender people, like all of these issues? How do you use your social media to like progress that?
So for me, it's a I try to stay pretty focused on my purpose, which is again bringing Unitarian Universalism to people who have never heard of it. And so because of that, then naturally by defining what Unitarian Universalism is and staying focused again on defining who we are, that's naturally going to bring in the things that are most important to us. So I don't know that I am promoting those as much as simply this is a part of our religion. And I have, I have come out and I've wanted to be very direct about if these are things that, like in that video that was shown at the start, if these are things that you don't value, that you don't agree with, you're probably not going to be very comfortable in a UU congregation. Um, and I hope that you're not. Like, there is a level of responsibility that I feel about, okay, what happens if I am encouraging people to go find a UU congregation near them and they have a bad experience? And I worry about that all the time. So mine is less trying to promote certain things and more to simply say, this is what Unitarian Universalism is.
So I think I certainly have a different certain political issues that I see as informed by my faith that I try to promote, and it's typically kind of a litany of things, and I'll do videos on each of those. And I will say that like especially when we were doing this Take Back Christianity campaign that I mentioned earlier, we identified several key voting issues, and a lot of times those things are things that I make videos about, but also. I They're also the kinds of things that I preach about on Sunday morning. And so, especially at the beginning of my ministry, people will be like, "Man, why are you always so political?" And I was like, I don't know how to preach any other way. That's like just the only way that I know how to do that." And so it's also like automatically in what I'm talking about because I don't think, at least I don't think I can read the text and find anything else other than social justice kinds of concerns, and so that's naturally what I'm talking about. So I don't think that my platform is intentionally like yours is, Reverend Joanna, just about like informing about the tradition broadly. I think mine is pretty specifically about how it is that we're confronting misuse of Scripture because Christian nationalism in particular is misusing Scripture. And so I see it as my job to kind of call out that misuse and to proclaim what I see, at least, as a more authentic version of what Christianity ought to be.
Thank you both so much. Keela, do you have the next question?
I do. So I'm going to ask each of you a different question that's specific to you. So Reverend Joanna, I noticed on your church's website at the bottom you have your TikTok videos there, which is kind of amazing. How has your congregation responded to your online presence, and how have you worked to integrate what you do on TikTok with what you do on Sunday morning for your congregation?
Yeah. So they have been supportive, but also often very confused. The majority of my congregants are not, especially the older ones, are not on TikTok. But I mean, it's a great congregation. So they were like, hey, if it's something you want to do and you want to get our name out there, terrific. As people have come to the church and they have said, "Oh, I saw, Rev Joe's TikToks." of course, people in the congregation were like, "Oh, okay, maybe there's some value in this." And in fact, one of our members right now, a great guy, David Konopka, is redoing our live stream, and part of that is so that we can the people who are seeing me on TikTok, they're going to have a better live stream experience, and I can take some of that content, and I'm going to be going back, and you mentioned a program, Reverend Caleb. I'm going to be finding that program because they're like, oh, you can start using these on your TikToks too. So overall, confused, but very supportive. And then I want to say about a year or so into doing this, I did a sermon that it was called like What I Learned on TikTok. So I try to communicate that back to them because I also think that, I mean, I am constantly learning new things about what are the questions that people who have never heard of this religion, what are the questions that they have? And I think that can help all of us.
Thank you. That was very useful. For Reverend Caleb, this might not be directly social media related, but you've mentioned a few times the Progressive Christian Alliance, and I think I'm getting that right, or Progressive Christian organization that you're a part of. Could you tell us more about this alliance, what it does, and what your role is in it?
Yeah, so I think so. What I was talking about earlier is the Center for Progressive Christianity, or progressivechristianity.org. And so this is an organization that I serve as a co-executive director of, along with my friend Mark Sandlin, with whom I also do the podcast, the Moonshine Jesus Show. And it was founded in 1994 by an Episcopal priest, Jim Adams, who was retiring from his parish in Washington, D.C. And he actually coined the phrase progressive Christianity. It was not in use before then. And by the end of the 90s, it was in broad use. And so, believe it or not, we actually have a trademark on that name, progressive Christianity. And so it has also been very strongly tied to now deceased Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong. And so we are the keepers of his work. Everything that's not owned by HarperCollins, we have the rights to and manage. And so this organization kind of spawned the global progressive Christian movement. And so there are a number of organizations all over the world that took the example from the Center for Progressive Christianity and formed their own organizations. We've always had originally 8 points of progressive Christianity. We now call them our core values of progressive Christianity, but other organizations have adopted that model as well. And so every so often we go through and revise those, but kind of set the standard on what the values are of even being progressive Christian. So that's mostly what I've referred to. I am also ordained in and on the leadership council of the Progressive Christian Alliance, which is an ordaining body, a denomination, and it really works a lot with folks who have not been able to get ordained in other traditions for a variety of reasons. It's often because of sexual orientation or gender identity, but frequently it also has to do with theology. And so we've got folks who have been, Pentecostal or Southern Baptist or whatever, and haven't had a path to ordination. And so we did kind of actually a mass ordination back in February here in San Diego, which is something I've never done before. But we took folks who had been stuck in the ordination process for a decade. And I mean, in progressive denominations like the United Church of Christ, in which I'm also ordained, or had lost their standing and say like the Nazarene tradition because they were queer affirming, or have intentionally surrendered credentials, or all of that. And we had them go through the process in the Progressive Christian Alliance, and they were able to find a path to ordination. And so that was beautiful for me, because that was a way for me to use my privilege to help people who otherwise, might never get ordained because denominations were giving them the runaround.
Well, students may want to reach out for that resource after this forum. So thank you
Absolutely. And feel
for
free to
sharing
share
that.
contact information too, Keola, if that's helpful. If folks are interested in pursuing ordination in that way, I'm happy to talk to you all about that and to connect you with the right folks
Oh,
if that's something that's of interest.
that'd be great. Thank you. We're coming to the end of our time. Steph has a concluding question for both of you. So thank you so much, Steph.
Well, thank you both so much. I'm wondering, where can we find you, and do you have any final thoughts?
So mine is RevJoeUU on TikTok. I'm slowly putting some things on Instagram and Facebook, but that's the main place for me. And concluding thoughts are simply experiment and get out there and put some stuff out there.
Wonderful. Rev,
And you
can
can
you?
find me at Rev Dr. Caleb J. Lines across social media platforms. Wherever you are, I'm probably there too. And so I'd love to see you there. I'd love to connect with any of you who have any thoughts or questions after this as well, or at my website, calebjlines.com. And you can email me from there if you'd like. One thing just that we didn't say is I think another powerful tool is live streaming, and TikTok and Instagram make that kind of tough, especially if you want to do like a professional quality live stream, which I think it is worth investing in professional stuff for a live stream. And I think Reverend Joanna, I think that the congregation's willing to invest in good live streaming equipment. I think that's essential. I think that's really something that adds a lot of value. But it is, if you're using a third party platform like we use Restream, for instance, TikTok does make it hard, but you can find ways on Instagram and other places. So I'd encourage you all to experiment with live streaming some, and it's certainly if you're in a congregational setting, live stream your service. That's a great way to do that. And I would say also play around with carousels if you're on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great place to try those as well. So I'm just grateful to all of you. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this, and thank you for what you all are doing. Thank you for your ministry, Reverend Joanna, and all of you who are in seminary and exploring different ways to serve out. Thank you for being a source of good in this world when it's so often not good, especially right now. I'm grateful for all of you.
Yes, thank you. Those are great concluding thoughts. We really appreciate your time. This has been really educational and inspiring for all of us. And for all you students, we're going to have more forums like this next semester, so look forward to that. But for now, thank you to both of our speakers. Thank you, Steph, and to Maddie, and we'll see you at our next forum. Okay,
Thanks to you too, Keela.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.